took their 12-year-old daughter to the living room where she was violently raped, wearing blue jeans, a tweed jacket and a balaclava.
He entered the parents' bedroom, demanded money, and tied them up with copper wire.
Described as a monster, I think that's probably accurate. He was fairly quietly spoken. He took off the garbage bags he had on the girl.
Police are concerned the man could be capable of murder.
They say it appears he had been watching the home and knew the teenagers were alone.
He was wearing a knitted dark green balaclava with cream stitching.
13-year-old Karmein Chan had been babysitting her two sisters in their Templestowe home when the abductor struck.
Welcome back to our next episode in our series between Melbourne Marvels and Who is Mr. Cruel about the abduction of Karmein Chan. I'm Jay and I'm here with Eamon. How are you going, Eamon?
Yeah, pretty good.
I heard you in another podcast. It's okay. Happy for you to spread around the love. But very interesting podcast you did with Adam Shand on Christopher Crowther, one of the police's prime suspects in the Mr. Cruel case.
So he was number 7 in the Sierra files of the Mr. Cruel suspects. And while initially I pretty much dismissed him as a good suspect, I've kind of changed my tune on that for reasons that I won't go into here. But you can definitely go and check Adam Shand's podcast, Real Crime with Adam Shand, and if you look up Real Crime with Adam Shand on Christopher Crowther, you'll hear me talking in detail about that despicable human being.
Yeah, I definitely recommend people listening to that who are interested in this case. And
I also uploaded footage of Crowther from 1983 when he was interviewed on 60 Minutes, and that's on the Melbourne Marvels YouTube channel.
Yeah, I watched that. It's kind of very disturbing watching him driving around in his little car, prowling. It brings it to life, doesn't it?
Yeah, and of course, he is the spitting image of what was the Spectrum digital likeness of an offender, based on the 1986 Caulfield North abduction of a woman who saw through her blindfold the man who had abducted her. Of course, in every case in the Mr. Cruel, whether the canonical 4 or the other series of abductions that may have been the same offender, whenever the offender abducted his victims, he took off his balaclava when driving around the streets.
Yes.
He always wore a balaclava in the homes of the victims or in his detention premises. But obviously he can't wear the balaclava when he's driving around the streets. So this is when this woman has seen the man who has abducted her. And she was very confident in what he looked like. Christopher Crowther looks exactly like this digital likeness that was created by Spectrum and never released to the public. But yeah, go and check out both the podcast and the video of Crowther on Melbourne Marvels YouTube channel.
And speaking of podcasts, before we get started, there was another interesting one that came out after our last chat. We were talking about Dr. David Wells, the police surgeon who examined all the victims in the Mr. Cruel, or some of the victims in the Mr. Cruel series. And he was on a podcast interviewed by Liz Porter, I think it was, on Listener, Forensics on Listener. So that was a really interesting interview with one of the key players that we've been talking about.
One of my favourite true crime writers. She writes really well about forensics. And it was fascinating. A lot of people noted that Wells, he mentioned on the podcast how he was of the belief that perhaps the offender may have had a back issue because of how he had positioned some of his victims at times during the offences.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I found it interesting, although I didn't quite agree with the doctor based on what he was saying. Can't go into too much detail there, but it just seemed like to me
Well, there was a bit of discussion online how active this offender was, carrying victims around in the streets and jumping off walls and things.
So he's carrying Sharon around everywhere. So, but he was basing it on how, to his knowledge, the offences were committed and how he positioned some of the victims. But
right, because he wouldn't have been privy necessarily to all the stuff that the offender was doing out on the streets, because that's not really relevant to...
Yeah, exactly. He's focusing on the actual offences, the sexual offences that have occurred. And in those canonical cases, they're all children. So he's deduced that perhaps it was because he had a bad back, but I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and he also, the other nugget from that was that he did take an exhibit that he thought could be used to trace the offender. But
that was very interesting because back then they used to have, from blood samples, they might be able to determine if you were a secretor or a non-secretor, this type of thing. I did wonder if it might have been that because in the case of Joseph James D'Angelo, I believe he was a non-secretor, and that's a pretty rare occurrence. I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but I did wonder if it was something like that he was alluding to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's plenty of stuff out. In our next episode, we're going to get stuck into now. We're talking about the period from April the 23rd through to the 5th of May. So over a week after the abduction of Karmein, the second week of the school holidays, through to when all the PLC students went back to school. And so let's get started. What are we looking at here, Eamon? So,
the first article we're looking at was from the Herald Sun. It was on April 23rd, and it was titled Joan Kirner Pleads with Offender. It's by Louise Talbot and Paul Malloy. So Victorian Premier Joan Kirner stepped in front of the cameras with an emotional plea. She said, "I have a daughter, and it must be dreadful not to know where she is, not to know what's happened, not to know whether she's going to come home again." So Kirner wasn't just speaking as Premier, she was speaking as a mother. Her words came a day after the government announced a $100,000 reward for information about Karmein's abduction, bringing the total reward across the 3 linked cases to $300,000. So, the message from the Premier here is quite clear. This is a terrible situation, and anyone who knows anything about this man, dubbed Mr. Cruel, should come forward.
Okay. So the next article is from The Age on Wednesday, the 24th of April, and it's called Hundreds of Police Seek Kidnap Clues in Templestowe, Door Knock. And this was one of the biggest police door knocks in Victorian history. So we had almost 300 detectives and uniformed police. They went into homes in the streets around Templestowe, bounded by Williamson's Road, Reynolds Road, Blackburn Road and King Street, looking for clues. And they reported that the door knock had been a valuable exercise. Police had been asking residents whether they had noticed anything unusual or a person in a car, spotted an unusual car in the area. So Inspector Sprague told the reporters that the kidnapper had planned the crime beforehand and could have been spotted around the Chan's home. So that was why they were doing this door knock. They thought that the kidnapper had been hanging around. And, Eamon, we've previously alluded to some neighbours of the Chans who indeed did see a suspicious car in the area in the lead up to the abduction. So it sounds like this door knock did generate some valuable clues.
That's right. I've been in touch with someone who lived in the area, and her sister saw a suspicious vehicle in the weeks before the abduction. And our producer, Andrea, is also in touch with another person who also had a very unsettling experience with a vehicle that was lurking in the area. This is something that we will go into in depth in a future episode.
All right. So what have we got next?
Well, it turns out that even in the media, there was a third account from this door knock. So on the 24th of April, an article was published in the Herald Sun, and that was titled "Neighbour's Boy Followed." So that's an article by Louise Talbot and Mike Edmonds, and it was on page 7. So just weeks before Karmein Chan disappeared, a disturbing event unfolded only 500 metres from her home. On April 1st, a young boy was followed by a man driving a car, only hours after someone had tried to break into his family's house. The intruder triggered the alarm while forcing a rear window. Inside at the time was the boy's 13-year-old sister. The boy's mother told police they'd been worried for weeks. She explained that after the attempted break-in, the whole family had been on edge and that the incident had deeply unsettled her children. She also stressed that they weren't close to the Chans and had no idea why their home might have been targeted. So detectives were now investigating whether the attempted burglary and the boy being followed the same day were connected to Karmein's abduction.
Okay, so another interesting case potentially coming out of this door knock. And it definitely adds up to there was, if it wasn't the same person, but there was one or multiple men prowling around this area in the weeks in the lead up to the attack, and even trying to break into people's homes, following children.
Very strange. Okay, we're going to play the ABC News clip now from the evening of the 29th of April. This is a Monday night, and it's the day before PLC go back to school for I believe it was term 3 in 1991. Term 2, 1991.
25 detectives have been working around the clock since the 13-year-old disappeared from her Templestowe home 2 weeks ago. Police say many calls from the public have concentrated around Templestowe, but the abductor could be anywhere in Victoria. They had hoped the girl would be returned by the end of the school holidays.
I certainly don't want to accept the fact just because the school goes back tomorrow that that's the end of it as far as we're concerned. I certainly will have hopes. Obviously, those hopes and they become more graver with each day that passes.
With hundreds of suspects, police say there's every chance they have the name of the offender. They're keeping their options open as to whether they're looking for the same man believed responsible for 2 earlier abductions.
So the next day in the Age, on Tuesday the 30th of April, it's the first day back for PLC students, and the headline is "Students to Pray for Safe Return of Karmein Chan." So this article is by Bruce Tobin, and it says that there's going to be a special assembly at PLC to discuss the events of Karmein's kidnapping, which happened during the school holidays, and that police will ask students to fill in a questionnaire. So again, David Sprague is quoted. He's going to be asking students to provide details of any suspicious activity near the school or around their homes before the abduction of Karmein. And it again says that what we just heard there in the ABC clip, that detectives had been hoping that Karmein would be released by the end of the school holidays, but they're now holding grave fears for her safety. And finally, it mentions that they've been working through a list of more than 130 people that they believe would be capable of kidnapping children. And interestingly, a covert investigation has been examining the background of all these suspects to establish whether they are married or single, what type of car they drive, their occupation, and whether their partners go away during the school holidays. So what do you take out of that, Eamon?
Well, I'm disappointed, and for me, this shows that the investigation, the investigators are obviously under a lot of pressure because they don't know where Karmein is. And, almost on a daily basis, they're being asked by journalists, well, where is she? What are you doing to find her? And so they're feeling the pressure. And they made a mistake. And the mistake that they've made is that they are claiming that all of the attacks occurred on school holidays. So they expect that she might be returned by the end of the school holidays, or they're asking people to look out for suspects who are away on the school holidays, but they're coming back now. This was an error by the investigators, because we know not all of the attacks occurred in school holidays. In fact, the one just before that hadn't, as we've said many times before. Nicola Linus wasn't abducted on school holidays.
Right. And the other thing that I found interesting in that article was the questionnaire that they're going to present all PLC students with. And you shared with me some comments from people on your website, from old PLC students, one old PLC student and one person who worked at PLC, both talking about some suspicious characters that had been seen sort of loitering around the PLC boarding house. So can you give more details about that?
Yeah, a woman who claimed that she went to PLC at the time, and her handle when she commented on my blog was PLC Old Girl. She brought up this story of how in the early 1980s, so a few years beforehand, a man who she gave the name Warren the Wanderer, that's what they call this person, broke into the PLC boarding house and would sit and watch sleeping boarders at night. Apparently he liked wearing the school uniform of some of the boarders. I had heard a similar story from another commentator a few years beforehand as well, about the boarding house having a peeping Tom. And that commenter had said that this person was breaking into the quarters in around 1991 to 1992 and taking girls' underwear from the laundry and going upstairs to the girls' bedrooms. But so I think it's a separate peeping Tom in that case.
He thinks it was 1991 but this guy was hearing a story secondhand from a staff member at PLC.
So the second one that I mentioned, it was a guy who was an apprentice who had worked in construction, I believe, on the site, and that was where he had heard about the girls' underwear being stolen. But then the first commenter, that was the PLC Old Girl, was a student who went to the school. So I think they are two different accounts.
All right, very similar though. Someone, a peeping Tom in the PLC boarding house, and two separate accounts. One apparently before 1985 and one around 1991, 1992.
A lot of weirdos out there, Jay. And also, like, one of them was a man, one was a woman. The commenters, I mean.
Oh, yeah. Separate commenters, but I don't know, it sounds similar. But so this was one of the things, the kind of information that no doubt David Sprague was picking up in this questionnaire. And now we've got the ABC News article from that evening, the Tuesday, 30th of April.
On the first day of term, Karmein Chan should have been among 1,200 students. Instead, she was in their thoughts. Every one of these students and their parents know the circumstances of Karmein's abduction 2 weeks ago, and they, along with Principal William Mackay, are beginning to despair.
Obviously, human effort is having very, very great difficulty in meeting her, and we need simply to open up a lead to where she is. And in a sense, that's something that only God can give us at this stage.
Mr Mackay discounts any link between the school and Karmein's abduction, and he says last year's abduction of PLC student Nicola Linus is mere coincidence.
The girls were removed from their homes, not from the school.
Nonetheless, he's advised all his students to be security conscious, and counselling will be offered to those who want it. Investigation Chief David Sprague gave out circulars and spoke to students before attending today's assembly.
The 23rd Psalm was sung, and some very moving speeches from Mr Mackay and his deputy.
Inspector Sprague says he hopes something positive will come from today.
Well, the investigation is going to continue until we've exhausted all avenues.
The one avenue open to Mr Mackay is an appeal to Karmein's abductor.
She should be back with her parents. That's the place where she belongs. She ought to be there, and nobody else has a right to her.
Yeah, William Mackay there very much trying to highlight the fact that the girls were abducted from their homes, not from the school. So trying to distance PLC from the offender. What did you make of that, Jay?
I can't blame him for doing that. Though, I mean, I suppose, yeah, look, I can't make anything of that. What?
Yeah, I just, the reason I asked is just, the first thing that would spring to most investigators' mind would be, whoa, another girl's been abducted from the school. This is an extremely rare crime, and it's the same school. And one of the reasons why Karmein Chan's abduction is so strongly linked to the others.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're talking about PLC.
Yeah.
Because two of the victims were from PLC.
Obviously, he's also got a job to try to protect the school's reputation. He doesn't want all of the students leaving. So he's trying to stop fear from spreading around. Okay, we'll go straight to the next article now, which was published on the 1st of May in the Herald Sun by Greg Tom. It's titled Crack Squad Joins Hunt. And it's essentially about Operation Spectrum being set up. So, yeah, mentioned how it's been set up to try to find the man who has abducted 3 girls, Sharon Wills, Nicola Linus and Karmein Chan. Pointedly, it didn't mention the Lower Plenty victim. And it mentioned how this announcement coincided with the Victoria Police distributing a wanted poster in colour featuring photographs of the 3 girls. And this is one that many people familiar with this case will be familiar with this. They remember this from the time it was distributed very widely around Victoria. And it was sent to, I believe it was sent to everyone's household at the time in Victoria. Yeah, and in some houses in New South Wales as well. The Victorian Police Superintendent, Kevin Holliday, said that police had considered setting up the task force the day after Karmein Chan was abducted, but that it had been decided to wait until the end of the school holidays because they were thinking that the offender, all of the offences occurred in school holidays, which was wrong, and she might be returned before the end of the school holidays. The task force was to be a 24-man task force headed by David Sprague, who had been in charge of the 18-day investigation to that point. The composition of the task force had yet to be decided, but that the investigative detectives who had been involved in the hunt for Karmein Chan would be joined by colleagues from various other squads and suburban CIBs. Holliday also said that police believed that Karmein was still alive, and despite this, the fact that David Sprague had homicide experience, as he had previously been the deputy head of the homicide squad, would help them in the eventuation that she had been murdered. He also mentioned how the investigations into the inductions of Sharon Wills and Nicola Linus had not been wound down, but they would now be looked at again in greater detail. And I mentioned, I think in our last episode, Jay, how there had been the Operation Challenge in 1990 after Nicola Linus was abducted. That was a separate task force that was set up.
But that looked into the links between all the earlier abductions as well?
Yeah, so they were connecting already the Sharon Wills abduction, the Lower Plenty abduction, and possibly the other abductions that we mentioned last week in Hawthorne, Donvale, Hampton, etc., Brighton, Caulfield. Any thing to note there, or?
Well, I think that circular that they mailed out to everyone's house, it shows the challenges of that era. Today we've obviously got the internet, so this is like the pre-internet equivalent of getting your message into every person's home.
Yeah, I will say, speaking of police errors, and this is one that our friend of the podcast, Christian Bennett, always brings up, and it's a valid point. This colour poster, the photograph of Karmein, they used the old photo from when she was...
she looks young.
8 years old or 7 years old. And she looks much younger. And, Christian always talks about that as being a real, poor job, because anyone who might have seen her, if obviously it would have been better to have a recent photo of her.
Yes.
Okay, so in the same edition of the Herald Sun, this was something I hadn't seen until recently, Jay. But it's a fascinating little account. So it's titled "Police Chase Ending at Chan Restaurant," and it was also published on May 1st, and by Greg Tom again. Imagine the scene. It's just after midnight on May 1st when police in Eltham spot a stolen unmarked patrol panel van that was being driven erratically. When officers checked the plates, they realised the panel van belongs to Victoria Police and that it was stolen from the home of a police public servant in Old Eltham Road in Lower Plenty. Now, Jay, Channel 7, the hunters revealed that is where the 1987 Lower Plenty victim lived.
Okay.
So
it's from the scene of one crime, close, not near enough, to the...
Yeah, strange coincidence.
Yeah, to the Chan restaurant.
So it had been, this police panel van had been stolen earlier that evening, and then a patrol car sees it. Oh, that's that stolen car, when they run the plates, and a police pursuit begins. So the pursuit races through the quiet streets until the driver finally loses control. The car crashes into a dump master in the car park behind Ming's restaurant, the business owned by the parents of missing schoolgirl Karmein Chan, on Main Road in Eltham. The driver escapes on foot, though. So, for investigators, the location is startling. Karmein had been abducted from her family home in Templestowe only weeks earlier, and now a police chase has ended at her parents' own restaurant, and the vehicle had been stolen from the street, which had been the site of one of the other canonical abductions. Dozens of officers flooded the scene. A dog squad and even a police helicopter joined the hunt for the driver. Witnesses described the man as having long dark hair, wearing a green and white windbreaker. The abandoned car is searched, fingerprinted, and checked for any link to Karmein's disappearance. Police hope this could be the break they've been waiting for, but in the end, they admit it's most likely just a coincidence. Still, in the middle of a city paralysed by fear, the crash at the Chan family's restaurant only deepens the sense that Mr. Cruel could be anywhere.
Yeah. Interesting little anecdote.
Yeah, just incredible.
The trauma for the Chan family as well. Some stolen car crashing into their restaurant while this is all going on.
Yeah.
But I think we agree, unlikely to be the offender leading the police from one crime scene to the next.
Yeah, it certainly seemed odd to do that, but it's when you research this case deeply for years, you do come across some startling coincidences, and I think that's one of them.
Interesting story. So the next one is May the 2nd, and this was a letter from Karmein's mother that was addressed not to Mr. Cruel, but to Mr. Kind. And this is another one that people may remember from the case who were alive at that time. So this article by Greg Tom in the Herald Sun recounts the facts about Karmein's abduction, and it talks about Phyllis Chan's desperate plea, not to the police, not to the public, but to the man who took their daughter. And in the letter she writes, "Dear Mr. Kind, not cruel. We know you're a kind man. We hope Karmein is safe with you. School has resumed, and it would be nice if Karmein could return to school. Thank you for letting her live. Please have pity." So this is after police have already said, their hopes are fading, and it's a really, almost, it's quite pitiful to read these words.
Yeah,
Karmein's mother begging for this man to, show some mercy.
Yeah, you can really feel her pain in those words, and you just want to help her in this situation because, here she is appealing to this asshole, the person that she must hate more than anyone in the world, or, just hold so much. If it was me, that's how I would feel anyway. Yeah. But she's reduced to appealing to him because she's so desperate.
And it didn't work, did it? Of course, we don't know if Karmein was already deceased by this point.
That's right.
Probably most likely. But if she was alive, then all of these appeals that we've heard from Karmein's mother and sisters and Premier just fell on deaf ears with this guy.
Yeah. So the next one is on the same day, I believe, the 2nd of May. And it's titled "Someone Out There Knows the Abductor," page 5 of the Herald Sun from the 2nd of May. And it's by a musician. Actually, it's an opinion piece by a musician named Jenny Walsh, who actually wrote a song. She was moved to write a song about Karmein when she heard her story. So, basically, in this piece, she makes a powerful appeal to the public's conscience, stressing that somebody must know who Karmein's abductor is. She argues that crimes like this do not happen in isolation. The person responsible for Karmein's disappearance would almost certainly have revealed themselves in some way through suspicious behaviour, nervousness, or inconsistencies in their story. She says that someone close to the abductor, whether it's a friend, partner, or relative, must have noticed something unusual. She emphasises that silence is not neutral, that anyone withholding information becomes complicit in the crime itself. By protecting the abductor, they're also condemning Karmein and prolonging the suffering of her family. And she also mentions how this is not only a personal tragedy, but also a crime against the whole community, shattering the sense of safety for families across Victoria. And she urges her readers to seriously reflect on anything they might have seen or heard and to search their own consciences. Yes, so it turns out then Jenny Walsh, her story is given in an article by Greg Tom on the same page. It turns out that she herself has been, when she was much younger, the victim of a child abduction attempt. So when she was 15 years old, a man had tried to drag her into a car, and she had managed to get away, but the memory never left her. So when Karmein vanished, Jenny sat down and began to write a song about her. And in just 20 minutes, she had finished this song. And it's actually a plea aimed directly at Karmein's abductor. There's a quote here from Jenny. She said, "What happened to Karmein really affected me. I know at least a tiny bit of what she must be going through." So the song was her way of reaching out, making her own painful experience and transforming it into something that might make a difference. She mentions how those frightening moments as a teenager become the spark for a message of hope. Yeah, so So Jenny actually was living in Laverton at the time, and she describes the experience the following, quote, "I was on my way home from basketball training and was waiting for a bus outside the school in sunshine when a guy pulled up in a car and started talking to me. The next thing I knew, he grabbed me and tried to pull me into the car. When you have two older brothers, you learn how to look after yourself. I gave this guy a right hook and sent him flying. She said he had climbed back into his car and drove off. I just felt numb. I went home and told my mother, but I think I was still in shock. I just broke down and cried." So Jenny said that she hoped her song, which she hopes to record, will help secure Karmein's release.
So what's your take on that, Eamon?
Obviously it was just, it's one of those things it's the whole community is very strongly moved by this event.
Yeah, it's bringing up all these raw emotions. So the final article we're going to discuss today is from Friday the 3rd of May, and it's a new angle.
From The Age?
This is from The Age, and it's by Bruce Tobin, who's covered this case so far. And this one is titled "A Rumours Hurting Family," says kidnapped girl's father. And it states that the father of Karmein Chan said yesterday that his family was being hurt by claims that his daughter's abduction was linked to his business deals. So this is obviously something that had been speculated about due to the graffiti that was left on the family car on the night Karmein was abducted. And the spray-painted message read, "Payback, Asian drug dealer." I want to get that right. More to come. So that's the basis for these rumours. And detectives believe the messages were painted by the kidnapper as a decoy. They have discounted any links between the kidnapping and the Chan's business activities. So, they quote Mr. Chan here as saying, "The police had already checked me and my past and record. They have declared that I'm clean. I hope the public will not listen to any rumours. I tried to tell the public I'm clean. I hope they will understand." But he said it was possible the kidnapper had thought he had done something wrong and took my girl. So this is kind of the first time we've seen the media dealing with these rumours.
Well, we did hear it in 1 or 2 days after the actual abduction. And that they had already dismissed.
Right, that they were investigating his business.
They said that they had already looked into him and he was clean, which I thought was very premature.
Yes, but it seems like these rumours have been bubbling away for it to now be the subject of an article in The Age.
And clearly amongst many of the journalists it was, and it still does to this day, John Sylvester for one. But I liked what Mr. Chan said there. He said it was possible that someone had taken his daughter because they thought he had done something bad, or words to that effect. That is possible. So someone with a grudge against him, possibly for business, even if he was completely clean, even if he was not a criminal in any way.
That's right. He shouldn't be on trial, like his character shouldn't be on trial. We talked about it in a previous episode, how, in the nature of his business, he had a lot of connections, and unbeknownst to him, some of them were criminals.
That's right.
One was, I believe, a receiver of stolen goods. And Andrew Rule talked about that in a recent article in the Herald Sun.
Yeah, and that man, who we're not naming right now, but that man was a good friend of John Chan's, and was the families were close. So, and the other thing is, John Sylvester is
correction. Yeah, it was John Sylvester, not Andrew Rule. Yeah,
and Sylvester has written about this many times, which is that John Chan was known to gamble a lot, and so who knows? It's possible.
It's possible, and John Joan Chan himself is keeping an open mind. So we can't blame him for that. But yeah, just another ugly side of this case, that the family again being victimised by these rumours.
Yeah, so I think the rumours he's referring to, because you would have had a lot of racial stereotypes going, oh, he must be involved in the triads and because he's from Hong Kong, and that's what this is about. Well, perhaps it's possible that Asian crime syndicates were involved, not because he was involved in criminal activity, but it's possible, as he said, that someone had a grudge against him.
Yeah. And, you know, there's no descriptions of any Asian-looking suspects or suspicious people, should be noted. Of course, we don't know for sure if this crime was connected to the others, but descriptions in previous cases were of a Caucasian man.
Yeah, and in this case, the sisters said that the man who took their sister was Western guy now.
So it does seem like there's a bit of stereotyping, you know, in these rumours.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, this is where the almost daily
the trail
coverage...
goes cold a little bit.
The trail goes cold a little bit, yeah. What was almost daily coverage up until this point, from around the 3rd of May, it definitely gets less frequent, but our next episode will deal with some quite noteworthy events in the next few weeks, next few months.
Yeah, and of course it was almost a year to the day until her body was found. So I believe you've got some interesting more scoops for us when we get to that episode.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll finish up there, Jay.
Yeah, thanks again, Eamon. It's always a pleasure. Look forward to the next one.
Yep, just remind our listeners to follow the Melbourne Marvels YouTube channel and to like the videos and subscribe on there, because that helps us reach more viewers.
Until next time.
Okay.
They took their 12-year-old daughter to the living room where she was violently raped, wearing blue jeans, a tweed jacket and a balaclava.
He entered the parents' bedroom, demanded money, tied them up with copper wire.
Described him as a monster, and I think that's probably accurate. He was fairly quietly spoken. He took off the garbage bags he had robbed the girl.
Police are concerned the man could be capable of murder.
They say it appears he had been watching the home and knew the teenagers were alone.
He was wearing a knitted dark green balaclava with cream stitching.
13-year-old Karmein Chan had been babysitting her two sisters in their Templestowe home when the abductor struck.